Well, hey everybody, welcome again to the Compass video series. We again wanted to just create kind of a video podcast sort of a setting to help everybody understand Nebraska child welfare, foster care and adoption, and just some of the challenges and the issues in this world. And today, well, first of all, I'm Kelly Mass, I'm the Director of Family Services at Compass. And today I have with me Nathen and Kendra Welch. And just to share a little bit about them before we dive in, Nathen and Kendra are high school sweethearts from Kearney, Nebraska. They're a faith-driven couple who embrace both the joys and challenges of raising a large family. With 4 children of their own, they welcomed foster children into their home for several years prior to adopting 2 children. They are passionate about providing love, stability, and support to children in need. Strong in their belief in God, Nathen and Kendra center their family's life around faith, using it as a guiding force in their parenting and daily decisions. Nathen works in IT, while Kendra is in the travel industry, helping others plan their dream vacations. Together, they balance their careers with a deep commitment to their family and their faith, making a meaningful difference in the lives of those they love. So thank you guys for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, before we get to the other questions, just tell me a little bit about kind of your timeline of parenting. You've got biological kids, you've fostered, now you've adopted. Just give us a little bit of an overview of that.
Yeah. Like we said, we're high school sweethearts. We did have our biological children very early in life. We were 18 and 20 when our first was born. We did have all 4 of our biological ones before we started the foster care journey. Atticus was born in 2009. We didn't really start the foster care journey until about 2017. And then we spent roughly 6 years fostering, whether that was having full-time children in our home, whether that doing respite for other families, and kind of the ins and outs.
How old was your youngest when you started fostering? About
2.
I don't remember. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
2.
the
The mom
was 2.
would know. I had triplets for like 3 months, and then they
Yes, you
spread
get
out.
it. Yeah.
So I know how that is. That's great.
That's always an awkward conversation when people ask if we have twins. We're like, no, they're 3 months apart.
Yeah, and then a little explanation comes with that.
Yep.
Yes.
For sure.
Well, tell us about kind of the beginning of the foster care and adoption journey. Like, how would, I know you guys well enough to know that you'd say you felt called to this. How did that come about? Was it like both of you at the same time? Was it one of you having to convince the other? Like, just talk to us about feeling called or that beginning of that journey.
Yes. So we had talked about fostering probably because our community of people fostered. It was not abnormal to be around foster children. And so after our youngest Story was born, we, it was me, no, backing up here. After Story was born, the Lord told me he was taking us into a season of fostering. And I was like, oh no. Nathen said if we had 4 kids, we probably wouldn't foster because we would have our hands full. And I was like, okay, Lord. So when he told me that, I said, Lord, if this is your will for our family, it's got to be Nathen's idea. And I told my best friend, I said, will you start praying with me? I feel like the Lord's calling us to foster, and I don't think Nathen's going to be on board. And she's like, okay.
So had you even told him about this yet?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
So I wrote it down in my prayer journal, and I told my best friend that was it. And one night we were watching TV, and this was a quick turnaround in a prayer. About 2 weeks later, we were in our apartment, and it was a commercial break on a TV show. And Nathen's like, do you know when Compass is doing their next foster care training? And I was like, why? He's
Tell
like,
me more.
Yes, tell me more. And I mean, I think I was filling up with tears at that point because I was just like, okay, Lord, what are you doing here? Like, and he's like, I think we should look into the classes and see. And I was like, okay. So then I went and grabbed my prayer journal, and I'm like, wait a minute, you have to see what the Lord just shared with me, even just a few weeks prior. And
I would say that's a common thing in our marriage.
Yeah.
Often the Lord has a conversation with Kendra before he has a conversation with me. She's very good at praying through things. We've had things where he's come to her 2 years before he's come to me about it. And that's
Yeah.
just probably better suited to our personalities. I'm like once I'm convinced, I just got to I couldn't sit on an idea for 2 years. That would just drive me crazy. So it works well for both of us. And she's a prayer warrior, so she gets after it behind the scenes.
That's neat. As a really quick aside, like off topic here, just because there might be some folks that watching that idea of like God talking to them is completely foreign. Just really quickly, like describe how does that work for you? You know, is it a big booming voice or something like that, or how does that work for you?
For me, no, not a big booming voice, but usually it comes out of a place of that wasn't my thought. That it just sits well with me. And we've been in that place several times where I've like, okay, I'm just exercising. Was this me or was this the Lord? And it's that out of nowhere peace with a thought that has come. And I really do believe that I have the Holy Spirit in me, and I hear from the Lord in that way. I've also had dreams and just written dreams down and watched them come to fruition.
So often maybe a thought that comes in your mind that you recognize this is not my thought.
Yeah.
But then there's kind of a peace with that, or maybe a dream.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of believers would say too, and there's a lot of familiarization with it. You know, the first time you may hear the Lord speak, it may seem like a foreign thing or something like that. But as you truly get
exercise and more confidence in who
you have a familiarity with His voice, just as I known your voice for years. You come to know the Lord. You speak to Him daily through prayer, through worship, just things that we're obedient in.
It feels familiar after a while.
Yeah, that's neat. That's good. Well, good. So then you signed up for the next like.
I think we signed up
class?
that night.
Oh, okay.
I had, we have friends, so I text a friend that texts a friend, and it was coming up
for like even like within our church, we had several families, including yours, that had fostered around us. So it's not something that was a completely foreign concept to us. We knew that it was going to be a long journey. We knew it could be bumpy. We knew there was a lot of reward with it, with seeing young people grow up and have a safe place, and we were excited, but we were also we want to take the class and just see what that was about. It wasn't a forever commitment. When you sign up for that class, it's not like, okay, well, we're here for the next 20 years. Your house is open and we're going to place kids there. No, like we were taking it one day at a time. I mean,
training at a time.
The class was weeks at a time, once a week for, 5 weeks or something like that. Yeah, and we'd reevaluate after each one, and then we would go to the next class. And just keeping that mindset helped us stay open to it and stay fresh to it.
I mean, I know certainly around Compass we talk about you wouldn't ever want to pressure somebody into becoming a foster parent. And so I like that. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that before, that like they're going to a class and sort of a class night, one of the 10 sessions or whatever it was back when you took it, and reevaluating after that session, okay, are we still in on this? But that's a really wise way to approach it, because we wouldn't ever want somebody to feel pressured into doing something as personal and sometimes as intense as foster care. And I truly believe that there has to be a sense of calling with it, because it can be challenging enough. The challenging seasons are challenging enough. You got to have something deeper than just, this sounded like a neat idea, or we just want to help kids. Like, you got to have something deeper than that to really carry you through those really tough times. I've never heard of anybody like, usually people are like, have this sort of starry-eyed idealism. We're going to talk about that. And they're like all in when they do training. I haven't heard of anybody like reevaluating after each class, which I think is neat. That's good. And it's a free process for the most part, and so you totally can reevaluate after each class session. That's neat. So on that point, I've seen over and over again and lived a little bit of, oftentimes people come to foster care with a little bit of what I'd maybe call a naive idealism, like, we're going to help kids, we're going to take in these poor sweet kids and love them and hug them, and sure, there's going to be some hard times, but it's going to be great, and we're going to be this amazing happy family. They're going to make a movie about us someday. And it rarely works out that way. Mm-hmm. How did you guys experience that? Or maybe you came into it with a little bit more level-headedness than I did, and then many people did. But was that a factor in your guys' journey where you felt that calling, and maybe it was a little idealistic and reality was a little different?
I think, so back kind of on my end, I actually in middle school was removed from my home and went to live with my grandparents through the process. So I was never, I guess, with a foster family, but it was family. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I just remember back to those times of how broken and angry I felt on the inside. And so we kind of knew the process of kind of how that worked and how some of the behind the scenes stuff. So we were careful. And yes, you do, a lot of people like seeing your family on a Sunday at church where you would have your kids with you and you're like, oh, they're these cute little kids, they're little orphans, little foster kids. Like, yeah, but that's, you're seeing them for 90 minutes. And that doesn't show you what's going to happen at 3 a.m. or at midnight or anything. And so
Or like trying to get ready for church.
Oh yeah.
The before.
So even just like, we really made sure to keep our expectations back. And even though we were careful, you still encounter things that you don't foresee coming. And life is hard. Life is hard. And especially when you're dealing with broken people that their life has been turned upside down and you're just doing your best to help pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
So it may look like this beautiful thing from the outside, but there's a lot of work in it. And
I thought as foster mom, like I knew that it didn't reflect me, but at the time when we started having children in our home, and we started experiencing hard things, I was like, oh no, this is a reflection of me. And I didn't want the world to see it. You know, it felt like we were already failing and it was like 48 hours in. And I felt a settle in me, like children that come from hard places and that have just been taken from the ones that they know the most usually, and they're uncomfortable in my home. It has no reflection on me. And that was hard for me to get over. I couldn't do enough right things for the longest time, even though that's what I loved to cook and, you know, all the things. And I just thought that would make it all better. And it actually doesn't make it all better. And to just keep going. But I think I had a misconception of like, well, they may not be able to do it well, but I will do it well. You know, like just having children come into our home. And I think it was very humbling to experience that it wasn't going to be me to fix them.
Yeah. I think a lot of us foster and adoptive parents kind of experience that where when things, you know, when it's not like turning into that nice movie story, that I think it uncovers some things for us, right? About our own self, our own insecurities, our own personalities, maybe that false idealism. Mm-hmm. And often it is that, you know, the concern of what the public is going to perceive us as parents, right? I remember my wife and I having conversations about, so, you know, what if this kid in our home has to spend some time in the psychiatric wing of the hospital, which has happened? You know, what would happen if this child is on probation or goes to jail in the future, or, you know, various kids through our home. You know, what happens when or if our neighbors see the sheriff over at our house or things like that, you know, and had to kind of work through those and talk through those and pray through those insecurities and perceptions and things like that. So yeah, that's real. So real. For sure. Was there anything else, just looking back, where areas where you realize, yeah, we were naive or idealistic, or we thought the call of God to do this meant this thing, and really it meant other things? Was just anything else that stick out in your mind that got dispelled fairly quickly through the foster care and adoption? I
would say one thing that we thought prepared us well is we did run the youth group at church. Yeah. And so we had dealt with a bunch of middle school and high school kids and some of our very favorite people. And even as adults, we still keep track of a lot of them and stuff like that. And so one thing that when we started out, we had little kids, and we had our whole fill of little kids, and our idea was that we wanted teenagers, thinking that it was going to be like one of our youth group kids moving in with us. Yeah.
And they spent so much time with us. They would be over at our house. So we thought, wow, just add one more to that fun night.
In back then, we're in our early to mid 20s, so we're really not that far removed from what a high schooler would have been. Like, you know, it would have been like having your friends over, not necessarily, but that was we had this perfect dream of how that was going to lay out with having teenagers come to live with us. And we found out very, very quickly that that was a lot. That's a big...
And it wasn't necessarily what the Lord had in store for us looking back, but it was humbling to realize that the children we had in our home were well taken care of. Their basic needs were met. I'm talking about the youth group, our youth group kids. Mm-hmm. They were well loved at home, well adjusted. Their families were attending church. You know, just some of that stuff is so minimal, but it was, we thought we would get like one of them. That was like, you know, and that wasn't the case. And it was really hard to experience that. Kind of, we let ourselves down in that aspect of like...
We definitely felt like we failed.
After sitting down with our foster care specialist, determining the availability for a house, we had this ideal. We thought we wanted 14 and above. We thought that we wanted to have a high schooler in our house. That was the direction we wanted to go. That's what we felt called it. And our foster care specialist was upfront with us and was like, you know, you may want to leave the window more open than that, just as a safe play. And it really... That was the best thing. And part of the system that we enjoy is that you're not set. It wasn't like, hey, we set it at 14 and above and there was no changing.
Yeah,
you know, Compass didn't have a line of teenagers to just, you know, move into our house and it was like, oh, nope, you committed to it. So, you know, we did have a teenager come into our house and it didn't work out. And then I think 2 weeks later, we had a 2-year-old in our house. And was very much where we were best suited to handle.
And we didn't know it at the time.
Right. We thought we had little kids and we had our fill of it, but that's what we were in that season. We knew how to deal with a 2-year-old.
I knew how to change diapers and keep the cabinets locked. You know what I mean? Like,
our house was already baby-proofed. We had a 2-year-old. It wasn't a culture shock.
Yeah.
If you moved a 2-year-old into our house today, I can only imagine the things that they would get into.
We're out of that season.
Yes.
Yeah. It's definitely a different set of challenges and a different set of joys. I've always, you know, people have asked me about, you know, fostering teenagers or older kids, and I've always said, like, the things that you're able to do, the fun you're able to have is greater, and the complexity of the challenges can sometimes be greater. You know, obviously the freedoms and the things that a teenager is dealing with can be more complex than that 2-year-old, but also you can kind of have some more grown-up fun with them and, you know, do some of those things. So that's neat. Yeah, that's a great example. You guys thought that having a teenager in your home was going to be a little bit like hanging out with one of the youth group kids, and turned out to be different, and things went in a different direction. Well, hey friends, thanks for joining us for these video discussions. We're sharing these stories of the Child Welfare System as a part of our Give Where You Live event. Early giving is open now through the day of the event, which is December 5th. There'll be instructions on how you can give in the description of this video. Thanks so much and happy listening. So how can we maybe as a foster care world, you know, foster parents, adoptive parents, foster care agencies, like what can we do to help better prepare families that feel called to foster care? How can we like dispel some of that idealism, some of that naivete ahead of time? I know obviously we want to hit on some of those things in training, and we all do. You guys experienced it, but what might we do better to help dispel some of that ahead of time?
I think just the community as a whole has been beneficial to us, just being transparent with the ins and the outs, the good times, the trying times, and just being there for each other and having tools. There's many times where we had to reach out to other families because you're expecting fastball and it's not a fastball. So yeah, just as a community being helpful.
Yeah, you talked off camera a little bit about being able to be around other foster and adoptive families was helpful to you. So you guys probably came into it a little bit better prepared than some families because you were around other foster families, you were friends with other foster families, getting to hear maybe some of the challenges as well as some of the joys. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that comes to mind as far as how to do that?
Yeah, I think just for foster parents, and especially when you're new, and I know I definitely experienced this, not treating foster parents like experts. Like you said yes, so you should know what to do.
Yeah.
But better, like, and as a foster parent, being able to say, I have no idea. I need help sooner rather than later in some instances. But, when you say yes to your first placement, can be extremely difficult to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to navigate the visitations and how to receive your foster child in your home after a visit. And just those, it may seem very small, but it can be like a mountain in some instances where it's like, I should just know what to do. And I should know how to comfort this child. And I should know that, they need their biological mom t-shirt to sleep with at night after a visit, just those things. You don't know those things necessarily. So just better equipping. And I think I would mimic just the community. Be there, be in it, and be willing to hear the hard and the good. Like, not all roses and not all whatever is the opposite of roses.
Yeah, and that's true, because we don't want to, in trying to sort of be realistic about some of the challenges to expect with foster care. We also don't want to paint this picture that's all doom and gloom, and that like there aren't joys, because there truly are, And that's a good point. Real quickly, I think, and I didn't even share this question with you guys, but how has being involved in foster care and maybe even adopting, how has that affected your biological kids?
I think
I would say our biological kids have very caring hearts.
Yeah.
I think all of them enjoy it for the most part. We have a couple of them that I could see being foster parents when they're adults. I think there's a couple of them that have no intentions of ever doing it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop them from loving their adopted siblings, or even seeing kids that had come through our house that we didn't adopt. They still see them
and get excited
at
about
basketball
it.
games.
Yeah.
They'll come walking by, they still say hi, all that stuff. There's definitely some challenges when it comes to, we always kind of joked about when you're a family and your biological kids, you're like ducks, little ducklings, and you can walk and everybody just kind of jumps
They follow us.
Yeah.
And even to this day, our adopted children, like, they kind of seem to, you kind of have to guide them a little bit.
Yeah.
They just don't naturally follow you.
Yeah.
And so, and I think our kids, they love the process. And I think, like I said, I think they would do it again.
We included them in so much. I just remember, I think it was our second placement, and I was like, okay, we have a 2-year-old coming, and we have 2 hours. And Harlow went and got like her favorite toys and sat out in the living room so that she could share her toys with them. And we did include them in the process of bringing somebody in our home, and we tried to make it a team dynamic rather than what is this individual taking from us? What are they bringing to the table?
Yeah.
And you're correct on, I think some of our children probably won't foster, but for several of them will, or I think they will. And they've received it well. They really love their siblings that we've adopted, and they loved the fostering. They were sad when we said we were not going to be fostering anymore. They wanted to continue doing that. And I thought that was a good place to stop too.
And you could talk to them, but I can't imagine any of them would ever have like a story of like, well, mom and dad didn't pay attention to me and only paid attention to our foster kids. We really, really tried hard to keep everybody included. And even things like foster parent night out, you are able to send your biological kids with, and our kids love that. When we stopped, like after adoption, for a couple months we still went or whatever, but when we stopped going to that, our biological kids were probably more heartbroken than our adopted kids.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a minute, I don't get to go hang out on a Friday night with them. Like, that was like their community. Like, they loved doing that.
Yeah.
And we did family dates. And that was a big deal, especially if they our foster kids were on a visit. We tried to, Atticus went with Nathan, and it was simple things like, I remember one time we got on our bikes and rode and got pops out of the pop machine.
Yep.
And we rode back, and you could just see it refresh them, especially on those hard days where it was like, okay, we have a moment to reset. Let's see what we can do to reset. Like, it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be an all day thing, but we have a few hours. Let's see how we can fill each other's cups. And I think that was.
And even in those moments, they were still thoughtful. They're still like, oh, are we going to grab a soda for one of the kids that was in our house?
Yeah.
So,
or let's not do that today because they don't get to be a part of it. That was.
That's neat.
Yeah. Our kids.
That's neat. I think to that point, one of the things I think about, or I've talked to families about, is how it can, along with some of the challenges, but it can really broaden your kids' horizons, kind of like travel can do, where when young people see like, oh, not everybody lives like I do, or a missions trip, or some of those, or other just avenues of volunteerism, where kids get to see like, oh, not everybody lives the same life I do. And then they're put in opportunities to help, how that really broadens kids' horizons. And they develop that like caring heart or generosity of just, wanting to give and to help in their life. I think that's really neat. And there can be some challenges sometimes. Sort of related to that, I know you two are really intentional about your marriage and having a strong marriage, strengthening your marriage, growing in that. How did you do that? Or how do you do that, I guess, through the ups and downs of foster care and adoption? What have you had to do intentionally for your marriage with all of that?
Yeah, we are a firm believer that a good marriage doesn't happen by accident.
Okay.
And it's not a quick, easy fix. There's no YouTube video that you're going to pull up and be like, oh, here's the 5-minute hack. It takes so much time and so much effort.
If only.
Right.
Just utilizing those times like foster parent night out. Our biological kids and our adopted kids were there. There's times where even if money wasn't abundant, we would go to a coffee shop and get a coffee and just sit there. And there was times where we were silent. And then there was times where we could pray together and read through our Bibles. There was times where we could go over our bills. That's one of the things in our marriage that brings us closest together, is when we can go over our finances and make sure that everything is where it's at.
Yeah.
You want to speak your wife's love language? Just
At least
the
fine.
finances.
At least fine.
So just utilizing those times, and like that on a foster parent night out, there's 3 hours or 2 hours, whatever it was. But there's times even today where 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, we just try to be purposeful and get up and just spend one-on-one time with each other. There was some seasons there where we weren't purposeful with it, and you could really feel us get distanced. Mm-hmm. And especially when you throw in the stress of raising kids and dealing with appointments and the hurdles of some foster care stuff, you have to be, if our relationship isn't our priority, then it's going to crumble around, and then that ripple effect is going to be into our kids and others around us. And so we really did see that was needed to be important, and that we were the best versions of ourselves when we were close together.
Mm-hmm. And we had gone through a season where we weren't close, and that is how we knew we had to prioritize our marriage, where it was we've been doing this 52 date challenge, and that's every single week, and we go over the same questions every single week. And at first I feel like it was a little bit awkward to like how are you really feeling? And what I found was his hard, like through the week, what was hard for him was not hard for me. And then I would bring up my heart and he'd be like, what? I had no idea. And wow. Just getting on the same page through that. I know there was seasons where we really had to schedule so much of our lives, including intimacy, including all the other things. We had to put it on the calendar. Otherwise it wasn't happening. I had to know that we were going to stay connected and decide that he was on my team. And he believes the best in me.
And it helps keep me aware too. Like today's a good example. You had several doctor's appointments with our children. And to me, I'm at work. I don't see it happen. I just think it's okay. They went to the doctor's appointment, but maybe 3 weeks ago, that was the hard point for her. And so I know that when I come home, I have to be a little more careful, a little more purposeful. Just to be, because those appointments can be hard. We have children with medical issues that really throw you a curveball, and it can really derail your day or your week or your month. So just keeping aware of that stuff. And there's some of our dates where we just have this magical hour and we have coffee, and then there's dates where we're on the second question and we're kind of just at odds with each other, and we're like, you know what, we may just have to put the questions to the side today.
Yeah. We've been able to do it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's so easy to say intentionality, but kind of what you guys are talking about, really focused and purposeful communication with some of those questions, realizing that the things that are hard for you are not necessarily hard for you, and the things that were hard for you are not necessarily hard for you, and you can help support each other in that. But just that purposeful communication and then purposeful time together with different things, that is really key, because boy, especially during foster care and adoption, a big family, there is always busyness to fill in all the blank spaces, and one more crisis or one more thing to get done, that kind of thing. So that's really, really good. I think we all kind of need to be reminded of that. So that's great. What would, well, let me ask you this. You guys have already kind of referenced your faith in Christ in bringing you to foster care and then adoption. What role has your faith kind of played through the journey? And of course, parenting biological children is in there as well. But just so in any and all of that, bioparenting, foster parenting, adoptive parenting, what role has kind of your faith played in that for you guys?
I think for us, we heard very clearly from the Lord that we were called to foster. And even years into being foster parents, we truly believe we were only called to foster. We didn't have adoption on our mind. Obviously, on this side of the journey, we knew that that's what it ended up turning into, and the Lord went over that with us. And I think, had he on day one be like, you know what, you're adopting 2 kids, we'd have been like, okay, pump the brakes here.
I might have walked back out.
Yeah. He gave us just enough that we could handle each time.
Yeah, just right in front of us, what was necessary for the next step. And I remember just going to the YMCA and getting on the treadmill and playing Chris Kulala, I hope I say that right, Miracles. And just, that was my song. That was
worship artist.
Worship, yes.
Yeah.
And just playing that, and just, the Lord was so kind to reset. His mercies are new every morning. And that's what I felt as I got on treadmill, or got off of the treadmill, more or less, like, okay, I can do this. I'm equipped to do this. I can, and I like to say this in our home, but we can do hard things. And the Lord equipped us to do hard things. When we knew we were called to fostering, it was doable, like even the hardest part of it.
Well, and in this process, just like anything you do in life, you have to have a why. Fostering, that's our why. Do I think that you have to be a believer to be a foster parent? No, absolutely not.
Right.
But as you're going over this, thinking about if you want to do this or not, I mean, people do it for all kinds of reasons. You can do it because you love children. You can do it because you want to equip bio families to be reunited. Yeah. You can do this because the Lord calls you to do it. There's so many things, but you need to identify kind of what is the driving thing behind that. And that's what has kept us moving one day at a time.
Yeah. Something to come back to, like when things get really hard, you can kind of revisit that why.
And I think I asked the Lord, are we to be done after our first long time placement went on? Lord, are we to be done? And I didn't hear anything. So I was like, okay, we're going to keep going though.
Keep doing this.
Yeah, we're going to keep doing this. And it was evident.
Because even through the fostering portion of it, we could have, at any point, if we were overwhelmed, if the Lord wasn't calling us anymore, we could put our notice in, they can be moved to another home, whatever and whatnot. Now that we've committed to adoption, for us, that's saying yes to the rest of their lives.
Yeah, sure.
I could be 70 years old and our adopted children come over to our house for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, with their children. That's, we've said yes to this.
Absolutely.
And we're fully committed to this.
Good. Yeah, we are.
Good. Yeah, that's neat. That's good. What are maybe some misperceptions you've seen out there regarding children in the foster care system? I think of, we talked about this on the last episode, how kids affected by trauma, kids affected by parents that weren't always there for them necessarily, or they didn't have some of their basic needs met, or a myriad of other things. folks that aren't connected to this field or this world or don't have an understanding of those effects of childhood trauma, they even subconsciously maybe label those kids as the bad kids because they can be a challenge at times, right? Challenging behaviors, whether that's in school or in children's church or in other settings where they maybe again even subconsciously sort of get labeled as the bad kids. What misconceptions have you seen regarding kids in the foster care system or kids that have been adopted?
I think, well, one, we ran into this where there's that heroic feeling to start of like, I just stepped in and saved the day. And I think we found that with teachers, we found that with family members where they appreciated being a part until it got hard. And then they were like, what's wrong? And I think the best testimony to crack the misconceptions is sticking with them and not running away when it's hard. I think we had really good examples of that, of what it looked like for children to go through hard things, and especially the trauma, allowing them to experience the trauma, having a well-equipped counselor to walk you through of that, and be opening to hear you may be playing a part in triggering them, and what it looks like to do a better job at that. I don't know if that's quite misconceptions, but...
Well, I think a misconception that is also seen too is that, in a lot of these scenarios, people feel like, the state just came in and took these kids away. Or
they belong with the foster families more so.
Right. And that's even us, like you can't compare a foster family to a bio family because it's more often than not, the foster family can be a way better situation no matter what. Bio families have generational struggles that they're trying to break through, that they may not have the financial means, they may not have, they maybe can't provide a 8-bedroom house on a lake. That is what it is, but that doesn't mean that they can't be good parents.
Yeah.
In the state, and even through Compass and even through us, like we tried to enable bio families as much as we could. And there is a lot of resources for bio families. And there's some times where we even questioned, kids were in our house and then they were sent home. We're like, wow, is this the right decision? Like, we get to see the insides of it, the outsides of it. And one of the things that's tough as a foster parent is we don't necessarily, we don't have the loudest voice in the conversation.
Yeah.
There's CASA workers and guardian ad litems and all kinds of people and so a lot of times we were there and you can't speak up much. Like there's like a small portion of a meeting. They're like, oh, how are so-and-so doing at school? And you're like, well, this is where it's at. They're like, okay, we've
enough from you.
Yeah. And then it goes to these other people and you're like, wow, this person stopped by my house for 45 minutes this month. Like, I'm not sure how this person.
And they have the loudest opinion.
They do. Yeah. They do. And so we did a lot of learning through that. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we utilized our foster care specialists too in those times where we needed to be heard or felt like that. Our foster care specialists really had a different angle of approaching everybody on the team.
And we were pretty fortunate to have some really good foster care specialists and people that we knew before they were our specialists and people that we still keep up with to today. And there's a couple of times we went and we're like, hey, you need to speak up because it can't come out of our mouth. And
where a foster care specialist can address a hard thing in a way that's going to be a little less emotionally loaded.
Yeah.
If the foster care says that to the bio parents and or their attorney, their team, then and it would be more emotionally loaded if it was you guys saying it, right? Because then a bio parent can maybe feel like you're against them. And when in reality, you're just sort of speaking up for the needs of your family or setting a boundary for your family or, speaking into the schedule, a particularly challenging aspect of the schedule, the visitation schedule or whatever that might be, and needing to speak up for your family. And sometimes that can come across as against the biological family. So I think I've heard that a lot from foster families that in the beginning, especially, they feel like they're the low person on the totem pole that doesn't have much of a voice. And I think when you do it for a while, you realize you do have a voice. You just have to be willing to speak up a little bit more, and or utilize your foster care specialist that can be that advocate for you and things like that. Sometimes we're all just a little bit too accommodating. We got to realize I do need to have some boundaries for my family, or I can have some input to the schedule and those kinds of things. But I've heard a lot of foster families, and I've felt that too, that man, we're kind of the low person on the totem pole. We don't have a lot of say here. And I think you learn to kind of push through that a little bit. But what about bio parents? What maybe some misconceptions out there, folks that don't know the foster care and adoption world? What are some misconceptions about biological parents, and also kind of what should people know about a foster parent's relationship with bio parents? What's been your experiences, or what did you try to do? Those kinds of things.
I think I kind of touched on it just a little bit with bio parents can be from a very broken situation themselves. We talk about the trauma that a foster child may harness, but their parents can have just as much.
Right.
We try to do our best job to facilitate a relationship with them that was also safe and productive. There's times, and I didn't expect this, but there's times where a bio family feels that if they can make a foster family look not like insufficient, that they'll just get their kids back. And that's not necessarily the thing, because they have mile markers they need to hit, and that's the situation. And so there's times where in a meeting, like, things might get said about us that we don't agree with, or it's not the way, and it's just that you got to be a little tougher. It did catch us off guard. We're like, we're doing everything in our power to help you get your kids back.
Yeah.
Especially in those scenarios, we had no intentions of adopting. So it was 100% we wanted them reunified with their families. And it's hard to convince bio families that you're on their team.
Yeah.
They don't trust many people. And that's just something you have to work on. And at the end of the day, if they don't want your help, they don't want your help. And so
I think for me, I thought that if they saw that I wanted to be on their team and I really wanted their children to be reunited with them, that they would receive me well. Like, I worked on warm smiles, as we're entering in the courtroom, just all the things. I started a notebook to communicate with how their days are going, and especially on the days when they didn't get to see their children, how was it going, what we did. And, we did have set a boundary to stop that, because it was just too much. And then I think allowing ourselves to be okay with them not wanting to be on our team, but knowing that they are still worthy of parenting their children, and they're still trying, and no better time than when you have everybody around you to help you and support you, and it doesn't have to just be us.
I've certainly experienced that as well. Where maybe some idealism going into it, that I'm going to be able to develop this beautiful sort of co-parenting relationship with the bio parents, and sometimes that does work out where you really can develop that kind of co-parenting relationship with the bio parents, and that's a really neat thing. It obviously still coming with its challenges, but there's other times where those parents, and if I put myself in their shoes, they didn't ask for this help from all of us foster parents. They didn't ask for another set of parents to be involved in their life and their parenting journey. They're doing the best they can, and sometimes they don't necessarily want that co-parenting relationship, and that's okay too. And like you say, they're very worthy of being their kids' parents, assuming they can do that work to make their home safe and all that. What are some ways, you've touched on a couple of things. What are some ways that you guys tried to champion those bio parents and maybe champion that reunification journey when possible?
Definitely being as flexible as possible. There was sometimes like demand on the schedule that was maybe inconvenient would be the best way to put it. And we would just always do our best to try to meet them where they were at. We could rearrange things and make it work. Even little things like doctor's appointments that were out of town. Kendra many times offered bio parents to ride with her to those. And that can be a situation that maybe many people aren't very comfortable with.
Yeah.
You drive into Omaha in the car with a bio parent that may not necessarily be the most friendly person and does, like I said, doesn't want your help, doesn't want anything like that. But guess what?
Yeah.
Like, that's what we can do is offer it. That's what we can do in that scenario.
Yeah, that's good. I talk to a lot of folks that are thinking about foster parenting, and that that idea of how can we prepare our own family to help champion the bio parents, champion reunification, talk about it with our kids, and talk about it with those foster kids that we are looking forward to, we're planning for, we're praying for reunification, and then also conveying that to the biological parents. It is sometimes hard to develop trust that you really are trying to work with them towards reunification, and I don't blame a bio parent for that. I think in my shoes, if I was in their shoes, it would be tough to trust that as well. So anything that we can do to kind of do that and convey that, making some allowances, being flexible, bringing a bio parent with you to a medical appointment, those are great things. Anything that comes to mind? You guys fostered for 6 years. You're adoptive parents. When you think on sort of a system-wide level, there's a lot. I think that folks that are outside the child welfare system, all they see is often the headlines, and those are usually bad headlines. Those are the stories that didn't turn out very well. So, we hear often it's a broken system, and I think in general, Nebraska does a pretty good job. We have a pretty healthy child welfare system with lots of shortcomings. But having talked to providers, foster parents, agencies from other states, I think Nebraska does a really pretty good job. But what are some things that you'd like to see changed or improved, maybe about the foster care system, the child welfare system? Anything come to mind for you guys that you experienced?
I would agree with you. I think we have a lot of things in place. I think partnering with Compass is one of the best decisions we made. I couldn't imagine going through the foster care journey just kind of without any resources.
Yeah.
And obviously, with us being believers, we could have leaned heavily on the church to be able to help us with stuff like that. But I think just utilizing tools like Compass, because there's some things that we just didn't understand, that it took a foster care specialist to be like, okay, slow down. This is what this paperwork means. And even things like, we were talking about with doctor's appointments. Where we're not their guardians or anything. Like, really, we take them to these doctor's appointments, and half the
on
time,
paper we're nobody.
We're nobody. Yeah. So we're lucky they even let us sit in the room with at that point a 4-year-old that's scared and doesn't like going to the doctor, and then if one person in the system didn't sign a piece of paper somewhere, then we're stuck in a waiting room and we're trying to make phone calls. And I don't know of a way to ever streamline that process, because some kids can go from one house to another house, and then you're removing Kendra and I, and you're trying to add so-and-so, and
yeah, we experienced
those were some hurdles. And Compass was great. The foster care specialist was always willing to jump on the phone and start calling, our state worker and all that, trying to get it situated to where we could get done what we needed to do. Because the last thing we ever wanted to do is drive to Omaha to a doctor's appointment to not have paperwork done and get turned around and have to reschedule. Because a lot of those appointments would be like, oh, the next time we can get you in is 4 months from now.
Yeah.
Well, you have a child, a 4-year-old that has heart issues, has lung issues. They don't necessarily have the benefit of waiting 4 months to see these specialists.
And sometimes it was just so frustrating because it was a paper. It was just a piece of paper holding us back. I think to piggyback off of that, and I want to just be gentle because I know so many that are involved and they're doing the very best they can do. And it's a tough place. But for me, change of social workers was difficult. Extremely difficult. So the consistency of a social worker on the case, and I know
you're talking about like your state caseworker.
My right? State case, our state caseworker. I didn't realize that there's like an intake social worker, and I don't know if it's the same. Is it still the same? Where intake worker, and then it switches. So the person you were most familiar with now becomes nobody, and they bring in somebody that's more long term.
Yeah.
And then sometimes because of their caseload, it changes. And that can reset the whole dynamics of the team. And I really experienced that frustration and difficulties, and even talking to other foster moms, it was like, oh, we were well on this path, and now we're scrambling. We're in the ditch because the caseworker had to change. And anyway, so I think that if I were to say one pointer for the state as a whole, I think that we put our best foot forward, but also consistency. I think that would be great. And we experienced that with our foster care specialists. Our foster care specialist stayed our foster care specialist for the time of our children, and that was a gift. That was a gift.
That's great.
And I feel like we had a fairly unique situation, even when it came to that, where Kendra stayed at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a couple conversations we had with our foster care specialists. They're like, they almost felt like they weren't able to do enough because Kendra is incredibly detail oriented and very just is able to make all the phone calls and do all that stuff. And they're like,
and you guys have a pretty healthy support system too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so yeah, I can imagine your foster care specialist feeling like there's not much for me to do.
Right.
Where other families might need more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we just thought that was normal to us. And then, were things where we didn't have to have daycare lined up or anything of that sort. But we still utilized our resources that we needed. So
that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I think kind of to wrap up, as just hearing you guys talk and thinking about all of this, one thing that I've seen, and I know from many foster adoptive parents, is we're kind of the types that just sort of put our heads down and get it all done. Like you were just talking about Kendra taking care of all the details and taking care of the kids, not needing daycare and all that. But we just, even through the hard seasons, oftentimes just quietly put our heads down and get it done. And oftentimes we as foster and adoptive parents maybe have a hard time asking for help because it's also really personal.
Mm-hmm.
This is your home, this is your parenting, and it's hard to ask people to kind of come in and help, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to talk to the churches around our foster and adoptive parents, the communities, the family, the friends, the neighbors around foster and adoptive parents, what are the most valuable helps you experienced? What are some ways that those people, neighbors, friends, church members, can kind of gently force their way into the lives of foster and adoptive parents to just provide the most valuable help? Like, what are some really practical things that those folks can do that are around foster and adoptive parents?
So just to piggyback off it's hard to ask for help. One thing that we really struggled with was asking for respite care. Because I'll speak for me, but I felt maybe that we were failing. Like if we needed to call you and be like, hey, can they come stay the night? Like we just need one evening.
Yeah, respite. So somebody to take your foster kids for a night or a weekend or even a week. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's got to be someone you know and trust, and that all they have to do is pass the background check, correct?
Yeah. Along those lines.
So we tried really hard to not use that resource at first because we thought we had failed. And honestly, those 12 hours would just revitalize us to push forward for weeks at a time. We even utilized respite care to go on a vacation once. Yeah. And that was really kind of heartbreaking for us because we're like, if we can't take them on vacation with us now, like how are we, if we adopt them, how are we ever going to go on vacation?
Yeah.
And, in that moment, that scenario is different. I mean, now that we have adopted our kids, they are absolutely one of us. We go on vacation all the time, probably not as much
in that season though, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So family and friends doing what it takes to sign up to be respite providers so that you've got some people that you know and trust that can take kiddos for an overnight or a weekend or even for a family vacation. And the other thing that people outside the field might not know is that respite's so valuable because if you were to take your foster kids on a week-long or 10-day vacation, that's also a week or 10 days that they're not seeing their biological parents and they're missing out on visits. And so that's another place where respite's so valuable is then those kiddos have maybe even a family that's familiar to them that can care for them so that they can continue their visits with their parents. What are some other ways that family, friends, neighbors, church members
around foster and adoptive parents can kind of gently force their way in and help?
I really, food, meals. Don't ask when you can bring a meal, what we want to eat. Just drop it off.
Just
bring it. We're going to eat it. We got, I think that
just
is
taking that off of Kendra's plate.
Yeah.
Not having to think about a meal. And then everyone's kids, for some reason, like everybody else's food so much more.
Honestly, it's true. It's true.
They like your food better than the...
You could drop off a lasagna that we prepared exactly the same the night before. And they're like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm just going to accept the blessing.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. That really is. And that's
so big.
That seems to be a big thing within the church community. I mean, when there's a baby born or anything like that, someone passes away, provide meals for a family. That's a big one. That really
so much.
Such a small thing, because you can prepare a meal for another family fairly quickly. I feel like you do it almost weekly. And so something like that, even if you're not even able to take a young one for respite or anything like that, or
a meal.
Yeah, so you're not called to be a foster parent. It's not everybody's called to be a foster parent. If your skill set in calling prepares you to be a CASA worker, I encourage you, explore that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
good.
There's so many cogs in the wheel in these kids' lives that you could fill in.
Yeah. I also just think on like a practical level, compliments, letting the foster parents know that they are seen. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like the ego kind of compliments, but hey, you guys look good today. Like, some of those things have just meant so much to me. Like, I don't know, those small compliments, just, that are sincere, and they go a long way when you are putting yourself out there very vulnerably as a foster parent. You kind of do feel like you're being judged, good or bad. And
Sure.
When somebody compliments you, it can take you a long way as a foster parent. So.
And even prayer.
Oh yes, that's
huge.
Yes, for sure.
It's something that you can do from a distance. It's something that's huge. I mean, as a foster parent, there's times where you feel like you're at war, spiritually.
The battleground. Yeah.
So that's a huge.
So much. Yeah.
So valuable. Yeah. And I think two things I might add would be don't hold those foster and adoptive parents at a distance or put them on a pedestal. You guys are such heroes for doing this, but get close and even ask questions like, well, how can I help you guys better? I think sometimes people just sort of think that you caring for these extra kids is just like caring for your biological kids, and there's different dynamics there. And so if you're a friend or family member, neighbor, church member, asking some of those questions, and recognizing there's some differences, and then also some mentoring type things. If there's if you've got some extra time and you can help, take a foster kid along from your church to do a hobby or something, fishing or, a craft or something like that, or even and maybe you're taking an older foster kid out for coffee or something like that. You're giving a foster parent a break as well as really investing in kids' lives. I say all the time, kids need many loving adults in their lives, investing in them and helping out. So I think that's great. Well, Nathen and Kendra, thank you guys so much for just giving some time, sharing sort of your journey, your life as parents, foster parents, adoptive parents. It's just so great. And I knew you guys would be fun to talk to because, sometimes with a couple, there's one that's really quiet and one that's more talkative. And you guys both have just so many valuable experiences to share, and you're both willing to speak up. So thank you guys again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, and anybody that's watching, thank you so much. Again, I hope this is helpful in helping you to understand the life of foster families, adoptive families, and the Nebraska Child Welfare System. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.